Comedy of errors. It all started from the appearance of a hairy, muscular hand from under the blanket in theatre number 3 in Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Tamil Nadu born British anesthesiologist Dr. George hated Monday mornings, especially the present one, as he had spent the weekend on the sunny, warm beaches of Torquay. There were three cesarean sections on the list, and he was about to put to sleep the first patient. Turning his back towards the patient, he drew the necessary medications in a syringe and then faced the patient, uttering his favorite phrase: Show me your left hand, love. At that point of time, Dr. George was only interested in finding the left forearm of the patient. However, the sight of it made him jump, and he was to forced to concentrate on the top half of the body. The patient's head was covered in a green surgical cap, and apart from a faint line of moustache, there was nothing to betray his or her gender. Dr. George had to be sure. Can you tell me your name, love? Timothy Robinson. Dr. George stormed out of the anesthetist room, attending the nurse and the surgeon following close behind. The Monday morning has a busy schedule for the members of the Board of Trustee of Queen Elizabeth Hospital. In an important administrative meeting, Chief Executive Dr. Robert Shaw was addressing the members about opening up a new unit in the south wing of the hospital. The phone rang. It was the nurse manager on the phone wanting to talk to Mr. Shaw urgently. He picked up the phone and soon his face turned red and the voice cold and hostile. He slammed the phone down and turned towards the members who were suspended on a taut thread of an anxious expectation. A patient has been taken to the theatre for cesarean section. The room contained people who were clever as well as shrewd, and they did not like the omen of this benign beginning and hence waited in silence. Mr. Shaw took all the time in his world and then whispered in a masochistic tone, The patient is a man and his name is Timothy Robinson. Almost relishing the shell shocked reaction of the members of Mr. Shaw, then turned towards Frank Martin, the finance manager who was sitting at the far corner of the room. Frank, does that name ring any bell? Frank's face was already ash white. He was covering his head with his both hands. As a response to the question, he only managed to utter, Oh, not again. Mr. Shaw was not in a mood to let go Frank so easily. Frank, I would request you to enlighten our colleagues about this man. I mean Timothy Robinson. The teasing tone of Robert Shaw sliced through the silence. Frank Martin shifted uneasily in his chair and, clearing his throat, started to speak. Mr. Robinson was admitted in our hospital a couple of years back for a knee operation. He paused, reached for the glass of water in front of him, and then, glancing across the room, finished hurriedly, but ended up having a dental surgery. How the hell did that happen? One of the executive members could not contain himself anymore. Actually, he was on the waiting list for the tooth operation for a long time. Meanwhile, the knee problem appeared, which was acute in nature, and he was put on operation list urgently, and yet he was admitted somehow. When he was admitted, the dentist took over and replaced his upper two central incisors with artificial ones, totally ignorant of the fact that he was actually in for the knee operation. Everybody in the room winced except for Jyoti Shankar, the PR officer, the only person from the Indian subcontinent in that boardroom. Always looked down upon as a member from the third world, he was enjoying the saga, thinking that this sort of monumental administrative hiccups can also occur in the so called foolproof Western world. Yet there was more to come. Mr. Robinson sued us, and we had to pay £100,000 sterlings as damages. The finance manager concluded. A grand for a tooth operation, one of the enraged members exclaimed. Apart from the negligence, the dental operation was a disaster. The replaced incisor teeth were slightly bigger in size, and once seen by his wife, she could not stop laughing. She shortly filed a divorce suit, stating the fact that she could not spend the rest of his life with a bunny rabbit. The divorce went through uncontested, and following that, Mr. Robinson sued us. His lawyers brilliantly staged the case, mixing up negligence with cosmetic and emotional grounds. We were forced to pay. As several members were blushing deeply to suppress laughter, Mr. Shaw was getting intensely jealous of this particular man. From the feedback, he knew soon after winning the case, Mr. Robinson bought a brand new BMW, a posh sporty car in the garage, and a life without a nagging wife. He must be in heaven. And now he's again in the center of a mess, destined to have an orthopedic operation and somehow landed up in the gynecology theater. If he sues and wins this time, he may go for a Mercedes Benz. Mr. Shaw swore that he was not going to let that happen. Mr. Shaw dismissed the meeting and contacted Dr. George, the anesthetist, on the phone. They were on friendly terms. George, please save me from this. You know, orthopedic operations are now done in the Royal Infirmary, which is about a mile from here. Hence, we have to shift the patient in the ambulance. It is plainly evident from the background of the patient that he will not let us go so easily if he has the slightest idea of what is happening. Is there any way out? Yes, I was also thinking. We cannot transfer him anesthetized, but I can use a light cocktail of medications which would make him oblivious of his immediate surroundings. And as long as we can shift him quickly, there will not be any danger. However, this would be a totally unethical procedure, and if not properly conducted, we are in grave danger. Dr. George summed up. Please go ahead, and I myself will take the full responsibility if anything goes wrong. Barely 30 minutes following this, when the chief executive's phone rang. Mr. Shaw, there is a bit of a problem. The nurse manager was on the other side. What is this time, Mrs. Queen? Mr. Shaw snapped. Irene Queen was not a person to beat around the bush. She immediately started to outline the problem. It's about Mr. Robinson. Mr. Shaw ducked. He desperately needed something to hide under. Irene Queen continued. As we tried to shift him under the light medications, he became extremely emotional and talkative. And these are often normal responses to the medicines we have used. She paused, cleared her throat, and added, initially, it was all about his recent broken marriage and previous girlfriends. The theater porters accompanying him were having a gala time. However, recently the topic of conversation has taken an unexpected turn. We have come to know that he had been employed by the MI5 as a British spy in Iraq during the Gulf War. Henceforth, he is spilling out all highly classified information, and we do not know what to do. Mr. Shaw felt that the nightmare was an never ending one. However, he reacted quickly. Lead him back to his favorite theme women. Gets somebody clearly really clever from the theater to accompany him so that he can manipulate the conversation. Hopefully, he will not remember anything when the whole episode is over. And for God's sake, get him to the Royal Infirmary fast. Mr. Shaw dialed the internal number of the PR officer. Jyoti, I want to dig deep and find out how this mess has occurred. I am talking about a Robinson affair. I want to know the names who are responsible for this. Inform me as soon as possible. As he put down the phone, he swore that the concerned person would be getting an early retirement. He will personally vouch for that. It was 7 p.m. that evening when Jyoti Shankar called Mr. Shaw at home. Sir, Mr. Robinson received a letter from the hospital a fortnight ago. This advised him to attend Queen Elizabeth Hospital on the day of the operation, and he did so. However, today morning somehow he landed in theatre number 3 where elective cesarean sections were being performed. But who the hell advised him to attend Queen Elizabeth rather than Royal Infirmary when all the staff knows that the orthopedic unit has been transferred to the latter hospital? Sir, these letters are typed by the medical secretary, and the letter date tells me it was written by Mrs. Hopkins. Jyoti Shankar was anticipating the silence which followed. It was almost a fortnight now that Mrs. Hopkins was fired by Mr. Shaw on the grounds of inefficiency. The nice, elderly, affectionate lady was replaced by a blonde lass who was seen accompanying Mr. Shaw all over the town for the last couple of months. The letter to Mr. Robinson was the last few letters Mrs. Hopkins typed while at office, and there she carefully planned her revenge. She knew that nobody could blame her, as the letter would be countersigned by the doctor, and they often signed blindly the pile produced on their desk. Jyoti also firmly believed that the landing up of Mr. Robinson in the theatre number 3 was not accidental by any means. Somebody sympathetic to the cause of Mrs. Hopkins did it by intention, and it would be extremely difficult for Mr. Shaw to find out the culprit. The whole plan was executed with a clinical precision to create chaos and confusion without harming the patient himself. Jyoti, I order you to keep all these completely confidential. At last, the long silence on the other side of the phone was broken. And if you made a report, destroy it. Abruptly, the line went dead. Jyoti burst into a loud laughter. He liked Mrs. Hopkins a lot, and she was one of the rare ones who did not have any racial prejudices. Her master plan had made the arrogant boss sweat whole day. It served him right. Keeping the phone down, Mr. Shaw walked up to his small bar. He needed a whiskey on the rocks. His mind was working at a fast pace. He will hush up the whole matter. However, if he failed to do so, he will blame the whole incident on the negligence of the doctors. The press loves stories of medical negligence. He remembered the words of his predecessor as he left the office. Robert, if you are in trouble, blame it on doctors. He's certainly going to do so. A cunning smile appeared on his face, the first smile since this day began. If you like the story, please give me a like, and if you want, subscribe my channel to listen to these kind of stories, travelogues, and other articles.